Good morning, friends. Welcome back to Sniffy's Petcast, your bi-weekly dose of positivity. I'm your host, Howard.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ting, co-hosting this podcast with Howard.
In the last episode, we talked about the importance of environment management and what are some common environmental stressors. Today, we will discuss how to create a friendly environment for our pets with Greg. Greg, do you know how to assess if our environment is friendly to our pets? What are some factors we can check, or do you have a checklist?
I think the biggest thing that I've mentioned previously is choice. Letting our pets have choice in their environment. If you wanted to have sort of a checklist to go down, I would want to think about what is a normal day for my pet. Mm-hmm. You can sort of think about, they play, they nap, they go to the bathroom, they run around, they sniff, they climb, they jump, they hide. Think about, does my pet have ways to do these behaviors? It's hard to make a broad sort of checklist. It varies from home to home and pet to pet. But yeah, I think if you want one thing to think about, I would say giving them choice or opportunity to act and sort of live in comfortable, appropriate ways.
That's a really good principle that everyone can follow. We as owners, we always want to give our pets choice. Let a dog be a dog and let a cat be a cat, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So one sort of strategy you can consider is think about sort of how your pet is responding to the environment. That's sort of one good way to assess what your pet might want improvements with. You might think that if an animal's environment is perfectly suited for them, then you wouldn't even notice. A lot of times we can tell that something isn't quite right because we start noticing problematic behaviors. So, for example, for cats, a lot of people think that cats are sort of hands-off. You don't really need to do a whole lot with them. You refill their bowl, you clean the litter box, and then they sort of do their own thing. But a lot of cats actually do really benefit from more engagement with us and more, mental stimulation, physical play. It can be a little bit harder to read cats. So sometimes people think, I tried playing with my cat and she doesn't like it. So I guess she just doesn't like to play. But anyway, all that to say, a lot of times behavioral issues are sort of the signals that our animals are maybe not so satisfied. So if you want a broad strategy, you can think about how can I respond to these behavioral issues, and can the environment be a factor? So with cats, like I said, a lot of times people will come to me and say, my cat will just randomly run around the corner and start pawing at me or attack my socks and start biting me, things like that. And that can be a sign that your cat doesn't have either space to sort of hide, and so they feel startled, or like they need to sort of protect themselves. So if your cat doesn't have an outlet to hide or climb where they can feel safe and secure, or they're not getting enough, they don't have enough room to run around and play on their own, sometimes it comes out in those inappropriate ways. So you can think, okay, maybe I startle my cat every time I come in this room. Let me try putting a, cat tree in the corner so they can sit up high and I don't startle them because they have a lookout tower and they see when I'm coming in, or something to that effect. So again, that's a response to the behavior you saw. Another example of behavior that we see that's influenced by the environment is when dogs counter surf, or they put their paws on the counter or dinner table and look for things, food or napkins, and steal them. Oftentimes dogs will look on the counter because they smell something good or something fun they want to play with. And if they get something fun, then that behavior is accidentally reinforced. So they learn. It's the same if you were teaching your dog to sit with a clicker and treats. They learn, I like getting treats, so I'm going to do this behavior more. They learn with counter surfing, I like finding crumbs, so I'm going to do this behavior more. It gets rewarded, and so they want to keep doing it. So the best way to address this behavior, in my experience, it feels kind of weird and counterintuitive, is by managing the environment and making sure that there's nothing on the counter that our dogs would enjoy stealing. So it feels kind of strange to do it, but if you sort of make sure that the counter is clear and then let your dog jump on the counter and check it out, then they will eventually, after they try a number of times and realize there's nothing up there, they'll get bored and stop trying. They'll stop looking on the counter. That's a great example of a behavior where you can solve the problem behavior without having to interact with your dog at all. It will just fizzle out on its own if you change the environment and keep your counters tidy. That behavior will sort of fix itself.
Wow, I didn't realize that, because every time if a dog tries to jump onto the counter, I will say, calm down, don't do that.
Right. And sometimes it sort of becomes an attention-seeking behavior. So they'll jump on the counter if they're bored and want us to come interact with them. So that's another reason that just changing the environment is a really good way to work on it, because there's no room for that. They're not going to learn that jumping on the counter will also get us to pay attention to them, because that can be reinforced as well.
Right. I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Guess what? Chubby is now sniffing around my desk. I think I made a mistake by putting his treats on my desk, and he smells them.
So I guess a good way to evaluate the outcome, or if the stressors are eliminated for our pets, is that we can check whether those bad behaviors or unwanted behaviors are gone, right?
Yes. Exactly.
Got it. So in our efforts to improve the environment for our pets, can training play a complementary role in enhancing these improvements? How does integrating training with environmental adjustments affect their behavior and well-being?
That's a great question. So, in some cases, like I said, it can be as simple as changing the environment and then the behavior isn't a problem anymore. It can sometimes feel like the issue just totally disappears just by a small change in the environment. And then you don't have to put as much time and effort into working directly with your pet. But absolutely, training and environmental management can go together really, really well. Usually, changing the environment first gives you a much better foundation to work on training. So to go back to the example of a dog barking out the window, closing the blinds, they don't see out the window, problem solved. But of course, we like having our window blinds open. We like the natural sunlight. So you can sort of do both. You can work with your dog. Maybe you can start by just closing the blinds when you're not home. And then when you are home, you can work with your dog more directly. And one thing to consider with that behavior specifically is that dogs get, really every living thing, you get really good at what you do. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. So if dogs are barking out the window all day, every day, when strangers walk by, they're going to get really good at barking at strangers. So it could be, meeting halfway. You just close the blinds when you're not home. When you are home, you have the blinds open, and then you can work more specifically with your dog. Another example for that specific behavior that I really like doing is you can get privacy film. So it's just, it makes it look kind of like the window looks sort of foggy. So, sunlight still comes through, but your dog can't see as clearly. And that usually really helps too. And if you ever want to test it out without fully committing, just taping a piece of wax paper over the window is a really good sort of trial to see how you feel about it. And it really does help reduce the barking out the window. From there, it's much easier to, get your clicker and treats and work with your dog, and it will be a much less intense experience, and you'll be able to train much more effectively.
I see. Thank you, Greg. So, according to our conversation, it seems that where we put the litter box for our cats is very important. I'm wondering, Greg, do you have any suggestions or recommendations?
Certainly. Well, I'll start by saying if you have multiple cats, the rule of thumb is to have one per cat plus one extra litter box. And even if you have one cat, that's still a good rule. And from there, you can think about the placement as well. So that sort of goes back to, like I said, having choice for our pets. If you put a bunch of litter boxes around and see where your cat likes to go, that's really the simplest way to do it. As far as litter box placement goes as well, it's good to place them sort of far apart from each other. If there are two right next to each other, then cats kind of consider that one big litter box.
Right.
So it would be worth generally somewhere low traffic where people don't walk by a lot, or somewhere sort of quiet. If it's, in your basement next to your washing machine, that might be great most of the time. But if you're doing a load of laundry, it might startle your cat. So somewhere quiet and low traffic would be a good place to start. Again, you can just sort of see how your cat likes it. If you want to add another or move the location, for example, when I first moved into my current house, I started off by just having one litter box sort of in my cat's bedroom sort of area, but it's also my office. So I didn't want to just keep it there forever. So I added a second one in the basement. And once she, got more comfortable in the house and started exploring a little bit more, she started using the box in the basement. And then I took the other one away once she had sort of established, okay, she can use that one too. So those are some sort of general litter box tips.
That's a great example. Now I learned it. Greg, I've been to your place and I know that you have a cat and a dog. So I'm just curious, when bringing in a new dog or a cat to our home, will it cause any problem or issues for existing pet?
That's a great question. We could spend a whole other episode talking about that. So the short answer is that it absolutely can cause issues. But environmental management is a really good way to help with that. Again, keeping in mind things we talked about before of giving everyone choice and freedom to go and act how they want. So introducing a dog and a cat, for example, a lot of times, more often than not, the conflict is that the dog wants to play with or chase the cat. So a really good way to help with that is a gate or a door that only the cat can fit through. So that way they can always hide. They are never forced to interact with the dog, and they can sort of on their own terms, when they feel comfortable, explore a little bit while everyone gets used to each other. If you've got animals in two completely different parts of your home, you can swap them every once in a while. So maybe you've got your cat mostly in your home office and your dog downstairs. Every once in a while, you can let them go check each other's space out, sniff around while they get to know each other. That works for two dogs or two cats, or a cat and a dog. So sort of getting accustomed to the environment and the other inhabitants is a good way to sort of help smooth things out. Like I said, there's a lot to talk about regarding introducing pets. But
Right. Wow, I didn't realize that environment management can also help our pets get along. So that's very good to know. Very interesting.
That makes me want to ask another question. So, sometimes we have to take our dog to a completely unfamiliar environment. Like we may take them to a boarding facility because we are going out for a trip. And that is a totally new environment for them. So, in that situation, what can we do to help our dogs get settled easily and fast?
Really good question. So there are lots of steps you could take beforehand. Ideally, it would be good to let your dog visit the place they're going to stay first. So a lot of boarding overnight places have daycare options as well, where your dog can just go spend the day. So something like that would be ideal, where your dog can, check the place out, smell it, get used to whatever sounds and sights there are to see, and just sort of getting to know the place a little bit. If they have a blanket from home that smells like something they're used to, that can be really helpful too. In general, the best thing to hope for would be just that the new environment they're staying in also allows them choice and freedom, so that they, and of course, there's only so much we can do regarding that. If they're staying at a boarding facility, at the end of the night, they have to go in their own little room and they got to sleep there. So, there's only so much we can do, but giving them, like I said, an experience with that environment previously, or something consistent. So, their favorite toy, or a bone they like to chew on, or a blanket that smells like home. Those can all certainly help.
Yeah. Every time when I took Chubby to a boarding facility, I would also take his blanket there. I don't know why, but I just feel like that's something that gets him to calm down and feel comfortable.
Yeah, that's a big thing. A lot of dogs and cats, their own smells are very familiar to them. So that's another sort of issue that a lot of people ask about regarding cats. Sometimes, someone will come to me and say, like an example from one of my clients is this woman had a cat, but every time her boyfriend would come over to visit, her cat would pee on his jacket or his backpack or something he brought in. And so, at first she thought it's because my cat doesn't like him, and she doesn't want him around, and so she's being spiteful and telling him, I don't like you, so I'm going to pee on your stuff. But what actually happens in cases like that is, if it smells weird and unfamiliar, then the cat will pee on it because that sort of smell is familiar to the cat. So they sort of cover it up with something they know, and they say like, okay, the weird thing smells like me, so maybe it's not so scary anymore. So that can also be why, like you mentioned previously, when Chubby started going to the bathroom. Yeah.
Sometimes pee can smell better than the perfume.
Yeah, that's what our pets think, at least.
So far we've discussed how to improve our environment for our pets. But Greg, do you see any challenges we might encounter when we try to create a pet-friendly environment? And how can we address those challenges?
I think probably the biggest challenge we might run into is things that are out of our control. If your dog gets really upset every time the big garbage truck comes to collect your garbage because it's so loud and makes all this noise, there's only so much we can do about that because it's gotta come collect the garbage. So that's probably the biggest challenge with environmental management, is things that we just simply can't manage.
Right.
So if there is something like that that's out of our control, then it sort of becomes a game of thinking about what we can control a lot of what environmental management is shaping what we do have control over to manage the things that we don't. So maybe the garbage truck is really scary and our pets really don't like it. So that's where you can consider, giving them an opportunity to escape from that. Whether that is, depending on how severe it is, maybe you take your dog for a walk on the mornings that trash gets collected, so you're not at home. That's a big commitment for us, but depending on how severe it is. Maybe you can set up like a little quiet zone. So in the morning, maybe you will feed your dog in a room on the opposite side of the house away from the street. You feed them around the time that the truck rolls by. So just as one sort of example. So that's probably the biggest challenge, is trying to work around the things that we have no control. It can definitely be tricky because there's only so much we can do. Or if you're moving in with a partner and they've got pets and you have pets and you've got to make them all get along, they got to live together. So figuring out how to manage the environment in that way can be tricky. So it's sort of finding the best way to work around stuff that otherwise couldn't be helped.
Right. And it kind of remind me that in episode 6, we talk about desensitization. So probably that's another way to help dealing with things that we cannot control.
Absolutely. Yes. And that can coincide with managing as best as we can. So, do what we can to sort of soften the blow while we do work more directly with our pets and help them get a little bit more accustomed to it. Absolutely.
Right. Wow, today's session is so informative, and I learned a lot of useful tips of environment management. So, Greg, I believe there are still things we couldn't cover in a 20 minutes episode. For owners who don't know how to start, who should they ask for help? A dog trainer, or say pet trainer, or a vet?
It could certainly be both. It sort of depends on what specifically you're looking for help with, but I think trainers have a good eye for thinking about solutions in more specific cases, especially someone like me who oftentimes goes to people's houses to do training. It can be just going in someone's home can be a huge help for coming up with a training plan, because it might just be something as simple as, have you thought about putting a baby gate here? Or have you thought about, moving your chair away from this window so your dog can't sit there and bark? Or, these litter boxes are too close to this air vent that's really loud when it turns on, or something like that. I think a trainer absolutely can give you great insights for how to work on things, or at least be able to sort of draw the line of, this is something we can help with through the environment, or this is something that needs a more direct approach.
Right.
Yeah.
But that said, vets absolutely have a lot to offer for this as well. Again, depending on what specifically you're looking for help with, whether it's prescribing behavior meds, that can be a really helpful tool for managing environmental stress. Or it could be helping to adjust your dog's diet, maybe. Or if your pet is going to the bathroom in inappropriate places, if it's something medical, then all the training in the world isn't going to help that. That's something that is common. And actually, usually the first thing I ask a client, if they say, my dog just started randomly peeing on the floor, or my cat is doing something, usually the first thing I'll ask is, have they seen a vet? Because if they have a urinary tract infection or something, that can absolutely affect their behavior and make them act a little different. So
Okay.
I think it's worth asking both a trainer and a vet, because they both have different insights on what can be affecting behavior.
Yeah. Greg, thanks for sharing how to create a pet-friendly environment. These tips are absolutely very useful for all pet owners. Thanks again for joining us today. We will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in today's episode. Your thoughts and feedback are very important to us, so please don't hesitate to reach out. Whether it's a story you'd like to share, a topic you're curious about, or you're interested in joining us as a guest speaker, please email to info@sniffylabs.com. info@sniffylabs.com.